things I can't control, taking over me. Did they try to take my identity? So what the hell have they done to me? I will take your thoughts away, and I'll ignite your fear today. Well, I can take you far away with my mind, with my
Covidian Cult is an article written by American playwright C.J. Hopkins, published in October 2020. Hopkins argues that we are in the midst of a global totalitarian movement, the first of its kind in human history, and that the Covidian Cult is made up of those of us who have drunk the Kool-Aid of the official COVID narrative. A narrative that goes something like this. The World Health Organization and global governments are working tirelessly to bring an end to the greatest plague in human history. Lockdowns, regular closures of local businesses, and medical mandates like social distancing, masks, and limits on movement are effective tools for preventing overflowing hospitals and epic death. Our only hope of eradicating the deadly virus are the new and safe vaccines and the speed by which we inject them. Anyone who questions this narrative is a COVID-denying conspiracy theorist who threatens our chance of winning this war. Members of the Covidian Cult trust their appointed health experts and trust the mainstream media. If you're anything like me, however, you're worried that the real global threat are these brainwashed bozos. A cult used to be a small band of weirdos hiding on a commune away from the prying eyes and interference of family members. But as Hopkins argues, in the age of COVID, this paradigm has been flipped on its head. The dominant culture is now the Covidians, and non-believers like me are the minority, tiny islands on a crazy planet. Hopkins says that the key ingredient of totalitarian societies and cults is mass conformity to a psychotic official narrative. This psychotic official narrative is based on paranoia and is not bound by logic or reason. The cult is faithful to the narrative, and this faith cannot be shaken by facts. Our cult indoctrination began in early 2020 when bizarre videos leaked out of China. People were dying while walking, and little armies of hazmat-suited medics were seen scurrying around trying to keep up with the dropping dead. Isolation facilities, overcrowded hospitals, and drone footage of barren cities. We were told that a deadly virus had made the supernatural leap from a bat, not a dog or a bunny, a bat, into a human, and that this unscientific event occurred in a dreaded and overcrowded wet market in a place called Wuhan. The virus escaped on a modern plane and supposedly almost wiped out Italy before it was declared a global pandemic by our new guardian of health, the WHO. The brainwashing campaign had kicked into high gear. For the first time in modern history, our businesses were shut down because of a virus. We were ordered to hide in our homes where our TVs, radios, and phones would terrify us with predictions of death in the millions, starting with the exaggerated models out of London by the infamously inaccurate Dr. Neil Ferguson. It can't be understated that this initial lockdown had a serious impact.
The United States Army Special Operations Command is seeking highly qualified officers to join the ranks of psychological operations. PSYOP forces are the Department of Defense's premier masters of influence. They use all forms of technology to influence the behaviors of select foreign target audiences. These activities strengthen our allies or exploit the psychological vulnerabilities of our adversaries. PSYOP is conducted both on the battlefield and in places that are not yet in conflict. PSYOP provides military commanders, interagency leaders, and multinational partners with truly unique capabilities delivered overtly, clandestinely, or as a deception.
PSYOP is a critical element to the overall RSOF mission. RSOF's main mission being unconventional warfare. It's very hard to have a resistance movement without that propaganda call coming out and recruiting that G-force to come in and train with you. So it's the critical first step in information warfare before you get to any type of decisive action. And we're seeing the same thing in multi-domain operations and near-peer threats, that information warfare comes first before actual warfare.
The United States Army Special Operations Command, or USASOC, is among the most diverse organizations in the U.S. military, bringing a broad range of competencies and disciplines to support geographic combatant commanders and ambassadors worldwide. USASOC's mission is to prepare for any conflict and arm the joint force with the world's premier Army Special Operations forces. Within USASOC, there are 3 operational commands: 1st Special Forces Command, U.S. Army Special Operations Aviation Command, and the 75th Ranger Regiment. The John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School assesses, selects, trains, and educates world-class civil affairs, psychological operations, and special forces warriors and leaders. On any given day, elements of the 3 of the 5 active duty special forces groups 1 Ranger Battalion, more than 35 civil affairs teams, 35 psychological operations teams, numerous supporting logistics units, and some 34 special operations aircraft are deployed around the world.
So the easiest way for me to describe psychological operations and what I do on the tactical side is trying to get a desired effect from either an enemy force or from a friendly force that is going to help us achieve kinetic effects using non-kinetic means.
While in the infantry, I enjoyed my time, but I was always curious what else was out there. When I was in school, I was a marketing major, and so I always had a desire to do that as well. And I was really looking for a way to connect my desire for marketing as well as my desire to join the military, and I saw psychological operations as a way to do that.
Psychological operations forces are the masters of influence that achieve global effects by shaping select foreign audience behaviors. They exploit psychological vulnerabilities of our nation's adversaries and protect those of our allies and partners. PSYOP employs all forms of communication, from high-tech to no-tech, utilizing methods from overt to clandestine and deception. PSYOP soldiers are culturally agile, intellectually curious, and creative thinkers that are the cornerstone of special operations.
I went into the field artillery upon commissioning, but the root of me was never a field artilleryman. The root of me was something else. And I found psychological operations, I applied. I went to assessment and selection, and I found an organization where I could pull in the arts and my degree as a sociology major and combine it into one profession. And I found my life's calling being a psychological operations officer. PSYOP is what I was born to do.
As a detachment commander, I had complete autonomy to run my detachment the way that I saw fit to prepare us for our deployments. And I really liked that small team mentality and working with a small group of guys that, you did everything together.
Officers who want to assess into psychological operations must first attend a 10-day assessment and selection at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Selected officers will then transition to either Airborne School at Fort Benning, Georgia, or begin the SOF Captain's Career Course. The remainder of the PSYOP qualification course consists of the 37 Alpha course, SOF Tactical Skills, the Black Knight Culmination Exercise, and concludes with language and cultural training. After the qualification course, PSYOP officers will be assigned within the 1st Special Forces Command to either the 8th or the 4th Psychological Operations Group at Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
PSYOP assessment and selection is a mental experience. It's physically stressing, but the focus really is on whether or not you are a creative, adaptive thinker. Can you work well with others? Can you be a part of a team?
The PSYOP Detachment, or PSYDET, is a 12-person team consisting of a headquarters section and 3 PSYOP teams. The detachment commander leads the PSYDET and is the ultimate problem solver. No PSYOP mission is the same, and there's no set playbook for a good detachment commander. He or she must analyze the culture, environment, adversaries, and resources available in order to determine the best way to exploit psychological vulnerabilities. Detachment commanders are expected to perform tasks beyond their pay grade, whether managing critical relationships with foreign decision makers or executing sensitive activities against the greatest threats to our security. PSYOP detachments conduct joint, interagency, intergovernmental, multinational missions, and deception operations. They are typically deployed the furthest forward, where they conduct psychological operations as well as assessments. The PSYDET rarely deploys as a full section. Frequently, they will be spread across an entire theater or deployed in smaller elements or even as individuals.
An operation that I know our team has made a difference is in Afghanistan. I've personally done over 2.5 years in Afghanistan. On my last rotation, as part of a precondition to negotiations, the Taliban demanded that we stop psychological operations in their country. So for us, as far as measure of effectiveness, that is the best thing that we can do, is our enemy wanted us to stop doing what we were doing.
In addition to special pay and unique training opportunities, Army Special Operations offers many benefits to officers and their families. Soft truth number 1, humans are more important than hardware. The Human Performance and Wellness Program builds up Army Special Operations members to reach and sustain peak physical conditioning. The SOCOM Care Coalition prioritizes helping SOF members and their families through medical recovery, physical rehabilitation, reintegrating back to active duty, or transitioning from military service into a civilian career. Officers also have the opportunity to pursue graduate-level degrees and work closely with U.S. defense agencies.
I think RSOF has been a great opportunity for me because they take care of their soldiers quite a bit. Right off the back, RSOF understands that you have a high op tempo, so they're trying to give you as much time with your family as they can. Every month you're going to be getting a 3 or 4 day, usually a 4 day, and obviously the Army does this too, so imagine every Army 3 or 4 day that you're receiving, the RSOF community is giving you probably one of their own as well. So you get a lot of opportunity to get back with your family. They're very big on, for the most part, finishing your work and then going home. So we're not trying to waste people's time. We're trying to get people in the door, do what you must do to get the effects that you need, and then go home so you can spend the time being a healthy individual, being a healthy human being, and healthy mindsets and create good products. They create good work atmospheres, and that's what we're going after. We're going after someone who's a quality individual, and part of that quality individual is made through the work environment. And so we're trying to provide that atmosphere as much as possible. Now, the other aspect of that is when it's time to work, and it could be long enduring hours, then it's time to work. So they give you that time knowing that there are times where there is no complaining about coming into work at weird hours. You do what you have to do.
Officers who want to apply for psychological operations must be a first lieutenant or captain in an eligible year group. Officers must be able to score a 210 on a standard Army physical fitness test with at least 60 points in each event, or 360 points in an Army combat fitness test with at least 60 points in each event. Officers need to volunteer for airborne training, must be eligible to receive a top secret clearance, and will incur a 36-month active duty service obligation after completing the PSYOP Q course. To start the process, contact the Special Operations Recruiting Station at your installation. If you don't know how to contact a SWORD recruiter, or if there isn't a recruiting station at your location, go to GoArmySOF.com.
No religion, no companion, no dominion to waver their control. No condition, no permission, no opinion, no conscience and no soul. They don't drop bombs anymore. They get inside your head. PSYOP song is a war to all the things unsaid. Infiltration, all pervasion, all persuasion, the changing of the rules, all evasion, all temptation, all predation. It's brutal and it's cruel. They're not alone, no, not alone, 'cause everyone's been playing that same game. From Hollywood to the music world, have signed their name in blood to reach their fame. They don't drop bombs anymore. They get inside your head. The PSYOP song is a war to all the things unsaid. No religion, no companion, no dominion to waver their control. No condition, no permission, no opinion, no conscience and no soul. They're not alone, no, not alone, 'cause everyone's been playing that that same game. From government to royalty, then marked at birth to take over the reins. We don't drop bombs anymore. We get inside your head. The PSYOP song is a war through all the things unsaid. Infiltration, all pervasion, all persuasion, the changing of the rules, all evasion, all temptation, all predation. It's brutal and it's cruel. They're not alone, no, not alone, 'cause everyone's been playing that same game. From Hollywood to the music world, they sign their name in blood to reach their fame. They don't drop bombs anymore. They get inside your head. The PSYOP song is a war to all the things unsaid. They don't drop bombs anymore. They get inside your head. The PSYOP song is a war to all the things.
SOF is a critical element to the overall ARSOF mission. ARSOF's main mission being unconventional warfare. It's very hard to have a resistance movement without that propaganda call coming out and recruiting that G-force to come in and train with you. So it's the critical first step in information warfare before you get to any type of decisive action. And we're seeing the same thing in multi-domain operations and near-peer threats, that information warfare comes first before actual warfare.
So the easiest way for me to describe psychological operations and what I do on the tactical side is trying to get a desired effect from either an enemy force or from a friendly force that is going to help us achieve kinetic effects using non-kinetic means.
And that behavior change takes place through a matter of weeks, months, years, typically. It's a usually mid to long-term process, and the techniques we use to influence that population range across a very broad spectrum. Some of those are your standard, media or mixed media type of products. It may be paper, it may be face-to-face engagement, maybe radio broadcasts, looking for cultural change or social change, specifically volatile areas of the world that we work in.
And the thing I would say I enjoy most about psychological operations is like the opportunity. Traveled, learned another language, so I've already been to multiple countries.
As a detachment commander, I had complete autonomy to run my detachment the way that I saw fit to prepare us for our deployments. And I really liked that small team mentality and working with a small group of guys that, you did everything together.
While in the infantry, I enjoyed my time, but I was always curious what else was out there. When I was in school, I was a marketing major, and so I always had a desire to do that as well. And I was really looking for a way to connect my desire for marketing as well as my desire to join the military, and I saw psychological operations as a way to do that.
I measure success in psychological operations on the effects that you generate. Are you actually generating an effect? Are you a contributing member to that team? And did that team ultimately accomplish something positive in that country? That's how I measure it. It's not really the PT test. It's not, well, how good you shoot or if you got your bachelor's degree while in service. Those things are just little events or little markers in your career, but real success is, did you have an impact on that individual that changed their life, perhaps? That's where it's at.
As the world watches and listens in horror, the peaceful pro-democracy demonstration in China comes to a violent and bloody end.
Mr. Gorbachev,
tear down this wall.
Wolves hiding nearby, whispering do or die around me. You say your last good night while I get
There is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
The target of psychological warfare is against the enemy's mind.
It is words and ideas.
The ammunition used by PSYWAR.
Its mission is to influence the thoughts of the enemy soldier, and at the same time
Is expected and encouraged to study foreign languages and the social sciences such as history, economics, and sociology. He must have a broad and sympathetic understanding of all phases of human experience.
gripping at my skin, the walls of night closing.
but the use of this force as an integral part of combat has now taken on new form.
As I wait to say my last goodbye.
These are the PSYWAR soldiers.
Music torture is a PSYOP's practice of blasting loud music incessantly to prisoners or other targeted audiences. On Christmas Day in 1989, Panamanian General Manuel Noriega became the world's most famous victim of music torture. Noriega was holed up in an embassy in Panama City during the U.S. invasion. A fleet of Humvees with loudspeakers surrounded the embassy as U.S. troops bombarded it with a playlist that included hits like I Fought the Law by The Clash, Panama by Van Halen, All I Want Is You by U2, and audio from The Howard Stern Show. Noriega surrendered several days later. At the height of the U.S. War on Terror, U.S. interrogators used music to break resistant Iraqi captives. PSYOPs Sergeant Mark Hadsell told Newsweek magazine, quote, "These people haven't heard heavy metal. They can't take it," end quote. Prisoners were kept under blinking lights in shipping containers while Metallica's Enter Sandman blared on repeat. Some other favorites included Rage Against the Machine's Killing in the Name Of, Eminem's The Real Slim Shady, the Sesame Street theme song, the Bee Gees' Staying Alive, and a sinister mix of the Meow Mix theme song blended with the sounds of crying babies. They also used sound effects CDs with labels such as Many Horses Galloping By, Crazy Woman Says My Husband's Never Liked You, and Tank Noises. But perhaps the most notorious torture song is the Barney and Friends ending song, I Love You, which Iraqi POWs were forced to listen to for 24 hours straight. One of history's most bizarre and disturbing PSYOPs was codenamed Operation Wandering Soul. It was part of the Phoenix program, which targeted the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War. PSYOP specialists exploited the Vietnamese belief in the wandering soul. According to retired Sergeant Major Herbert A. Friedman, quote, "It is the Vietnamese belief that the dead must be buried in their homeland, or their soul will wander aimlessly in pain and suffering. Vietnamese feel that if a person is improperly buried, then their soul wanders constantly. They can sometimes be contacted on the anniversary of their death and near where they died. Vietnamese honor these dead souls on a holiday when they return to the site where they died." End quote. U.S. engineers spent weeks recording eerie sounds and altered voices to create what was called Ghost Tape Number 10. Discarnate ancestors were purported to speak on the tapes, advising their Viet Cong descendants to cease fighting. The tape played from loudspeakers outside U.S. bases and on light aircraft flying over the countryside. It starts with Buddhist funeral music and spooky wailing voices. Then a little child cries for its father. A Vietnamese woman then comes on and tells how her husband was killed while fighting for the Viet Cong. Here's a clip from this disturbing tape. Are PSYOPs cruel and unnecessary, or just another part of war? Would listening to Barney the Dinosaur for hours make you crack? Let us know what you think. Like, share, and stay strange.
Recently, the CIA released a video that was pretty shocking, embracing a radical inclusivity in the agency. It's now known as the woke CIA ad.
I'm a woman of color. I am a mom. I am a cisgender millennial who's been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I am intersectional. I refuse to internalize misguided patriarchal ideas of what a woman can or should be. My parents left everything they knew and loved to expose me to opportunities they never had. Because of them, I stand here today a proud first-generation Latina and officer at CIA.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, this looks like a parody of what conservatives depict as what the left is. It's so cartoonishly over the top, it's hard to believe it's real. So what does it all mean? Has the CIA adopted real progressivism and equality? Of course not. This is a good old-fashioned PSYOP, or psychological operation, to indoctrinate a new generation of teenagers with the idea that the CIA is pretty cool. And no, not because the CIA has been taken over by the left. The political and military establishment know that the young generation is increasingly turning to radical politics. That means things like anti-racism and trans equality in conjunction with anti-capitalism and anti-imperialism. This generation was not indoctrinated by the intense nationalist propaganda of the 9/11 era. It's a generation that grew up with the end stages of the U.S. empire's senseless bloodbaths in Iraq and Afghanistan. It sees the systemic failures of capitalism. That's a big problem for an organization that needs to plan future wars without much resistance and needs to recruit a sector of the population to fill its ranks. To do that, they need a rebrand. They need a new marketing campaign to overshadow their image as purveyors of torture and mass murder of civilians. In other words, they need new propaganda. They need a PSYOP to brainwash young people who aren't as familiar with the CIA's notoriously murderous history, which is exactly who they are targeting with this ad. In fact, they recently admitted they're recruiting kids right out of high school already. And here's the biggest irony. While the CIA claims to be socially progressive, they're only talking about how they treat their own. Throughout the CIA's entire history, and until this very day, they've done nothing but actually attack and overthrow governments that are advancing social progress by installing or backing reactionary governments that use extreme violence to smash women, indigenous peoples, and other marginalized groups. The agency gives power to governments that behead women for adultery or jails people for being gay. It supports neo-Nazis in Ukraine, fascists in Bolivia, and so many more examples. The CIA spends a lot of its time propping up regimes that would jail or murder that young woman in the woke CIA ad. This is nothing more than an attempt to sanitize and whitewash its own horrific legacy and daily operations. Many other mass murdering entities have done the same thing. Defense contractors touting their first female drone pilots, Israel effectively pinkwashing its genocidal apartheid state, and oil corporations greenwashing their pollution. This does not mean that environmentalism or gay liberation should be abandoned as modes of struggle. Things like trans liberation and immigrant rights are major, deeply felt issues in our society, which activists have been doing such important and meaningful work to highlight. The co-optation by imperialism isn't the fault of these movements, but rather speaks to their success in bringing these important issues to the mainstream. The woke CIA ad is just another co-optation of these ideas to defang their revolutionary potential. The strain of identity politics embraced by liberals is hollow and self-serving because they have no ideological worldview to underpin them. This is why corporations have seized on the current of Black Lives Matter to say they're on board, profiting off of liberals who feel good purchasing products from companies who claim to support the struggle. Meanwhile, they're just steering it towards what's best for capitalism, claiming that things like fulfilling diversity quotas is the solution, instead of the radical systemic change the movement is calling for. The new CIA ads are part of a larger propaganda campaign called Humans of the CIA, to give that warm, fuzzy image of the agency. Beyond recruitment, though, they want this generation to see the CIA as woke, and those who've run with the analysis that the deep state has been taken over by the so-called cultural left have unwittingly become part of the PSYOP. This particular ad is targeting young liberals, but it would be absurd to think the CIA isn't also continuing to hire Americans who are right-wing. Some of their favorite recruiting pools are the Mormon Church and counterterrorism majors. Look, the CIA is guided by one ideology and one ideology alone: the belief that U.S. capitalism and imperialism should have global supremacy. Sure, the CIA is happy to recruit trans people, just like they're happy to recruit anti-trans people, as long as they ascribe to the orthodoxy that the U.S. should do anything and everything, no matter how brutal, to make sure it rules the world. If you think about it, this is what neoliberalism has already been for decades: adopting the language of human rights to convince people that imperialism is good. Wars on Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya were all about helping people and fighting racism. What we're seeing is a very new, very concerted effort to drape imperialism with an image that reflects the surge of progressive ideas. The Biden administration is wokeness on steroids, the promotion of women to four-star generals, the first Black Secretary of Defense, all imperial heads that oversee mass killing. It's all a superficial distraction from the fact that there's no real policy in place that improves the material lives of this generation. Unfortunately, the knee-jerk reaction to this advertisement is to punch left. And really, when you think about it, that's what the design of every good CIA PSYOP intends to do.
Notice that when they showed Fairbanks on ABC, there was no sound. In a speech to the New York Historical Society, Fairbanks blamed the FBI for removing the sound. However, in a later conversation with Jeff Hill, Fairbanks changed his story.
Well, I had accidentally turned off the microphone, like a operator error, because it was the first time that I had ever used that camera.
And when the Fairbanks footage appeared in the In Memoriam DVD, we heard this.
Holy shit! Here was another
Sound effects make visual effects more believable.
2014, I was stationed in Fort Richardson, Alaska. I'd been in the infantry for a while. I just didn't feel like I was fulfilling my whole potential. PSYOP matched my personality type. The mission set sounded really interesting to me, knowing the power that it can have when properly executed. You don't always have to execute a mission through kinetic means. Sometimes messages can have more impact than battlefield situations. I loved my time in the infantry, but PSYOP is different because you don't always need the hammer. You need something a little bit more creative. I joined because I believe in the Army's mission, and I didn't feel that I was giving the most that I could. You get a lot more freedom of thought. Not everything is dictated to you. You have to come up with your own ways in order to solve whatever problems that you're looking to accomplish. The information battle space is the future of warfare at this point. The door's open if you're willing to take that opportunity.
Persuade, change, influence. That is the motto of the U.S. Army's Psychological Operations Regiment. Military operations do not always require lethal force on a battlefield. Military information support operations can employ non-lethal actions and messages to attain military objectives. PSYOP soldiers are highly skilled, specialized operators whose work encompasses executing psychological actions and the development and dissemination of influential messages.
I think the most important thing for a PSYOP soldier is to be very well-rounded. It's an ability to fit into any environment.
Trained in persuasive techniques, PSYOP soldiers use their skills to change attitudes, behaviors, values, beliefs, and influence foreign audiences through executing actions and the delivery of messages utilizing a variety of techniques.
A tactical PSYOP team will usually be attached to a special forces team, and what they do is they look at what those teams are trying to do, and in order to support that, they find behaviors of the local populace that they can change to best accomplish that mission.
While performing military information support operations, PSYOP soldiers conduct thorough research and analysis of the intended audience. They employ specific communication methods using a variety of techniques, technology, and mediums to develop and deliver messages which will have the greatest impact and influence. These methods often incorporate the use of state-of-the-art multimedia products that convey U.S. policy and national objectives. The PSYOP soldier is a critical component of the U.S. Army Special Operations Command.
To be a successful PSYOP soldier, I think somebody has to be dedicated, they have to be motivated, they have to be intelligent, and they have to be able to work not only in a team, but also independently and be a free thinker.
Special Operations soldiers deploy worldwide on missions that range in size and scope from the tactical up to the strategic level. Smaller tactical or battlefield level operations are used to secure immediate or short-term goals. Strategic level operations encompass broad national security objectives during both peacetime and war. Typically, PSYOP soldiers deploy in small teams of 3 to 12 soldiers with an average mission length of less than a year. PSYOP soldiers may be employed in operations which support conventional forces, unconventional warfare, or counterinsurgency techniques, and in conducting raids, peacekeeping operations, evacuations, and rescue missions. When deploying, you may also assist other government agencies in support of foreign governments, humanitarian assistance, and drug interdiction.
I was briefing a Minister of Security with what I thought was the best method for that host nation to better the image of the police force at that time. That was the example.
PSYOP soldiers can also operate as a force multiplier, meaning they increase the operational capabilities of the military organizations they are supporting. This requires PSYOP soldiers to be versatile, agile leaders in top physical condition who are tactically and technically proficient with strong intellectual and communication skills.
Be prepared for a very diverse mission set and be prepared to study more than you've ever studied before. We are cultural experts and you have to be at that standard. You have to be both physically fit and mentally fit in order to be capable enough to do your job.
Following assessment and selection, PSYOP candidates receive extensive, specialized training at the U.S. Army John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School at Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
I think the PSYOP soldier thrives in environments that can be chaotic just because of the challenge. Just going through the course itself, each day presents a challenge, each task presents a challenge, and mastering those challenges throughout the course will give you the skills to master those challenges throughout deployments.
Training includes up to 12 months of instruction in influence operations, foreign language, cultural awareness, regional studies and analysis of political, social, and economic condition for their designated area of operations. To be a PSYOP soldier, you must obtain qualifying scores on both the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery and the Defense Language Aptitude Battery.
Starting out in the PSYOP community has enabled me to get a lot of free education. I've gotten my baccalaureate. I've now recently received my master's degree. I've been to many different schools that enable me to accomplish my mission at a higher level.
You must be eligible for a secret clearance, airborne qualified, or volunteer for airborne training. PSYOP soldiers' benefits include airborne and foreign language proficiency pay, civilian education opportunities, worldwide travel, advanced specialized training, and potential for faster promotions.
Within the ranks for myself, within 3 months of being in the unit, I was promoted to staff sergeant and became a team leader. And I've witnessed my peers rise through the ranks at a much quicker pace than when I was in conventional Army.
The Army's most specialized experts in influencing foreign audiences, psychological operations.
What you see is just illusions. What you see is just illusions.
Take a look around you, what you see is just illusions. Everything goes in circles, but there's no revolutions. They create the problems, then they offer the solutions. We're nothing but going to them, they treat us like subhumans. Take a look around you, what you see is just illusions. Everything goes in circles, but there's no revolutions. They create the problems, then they offer the solutions. We're nothing but going to them, they treat us like subhumans. Repeat after me, I am not free. They're lying to you, they're lying to me. What are they hiding? I'm dying to see. Why is it God that they're trying to be? The acquisition of wealth and power is what they know. They've always been among us, they own us, they run the show. When it comes to making a difference, we ain't moving. Freedom is a fallacy, you're just a free-range human. From the crib to the grave, you live as a slave, and that's just a matter of fact. If you wanna see change, forget all the games, we're gonna just have to attack. This is our world and we're snatching it back. If you don't want it, move off to the side. Not for the cowardly, not for the weak, only the strong come along for the ride. Won't be so simple, I'm not gonna lie, but that doesn't mean that I'm not gonna try. With everything that they're doing to all of us, maybe tomorrow we're all gonna die. Either way, they kill us slowly, dumb us down and make us dopey. Everything you see is fake and all the news you get is phony. It's time we show the people how the elite are so deceitful. It's time we rise up high up enough to expose this evil. Take a look around you, what you see is just illusions. Everything goes in circles, but there's no revolutions. They create the problems, then they offer the solutions. We're nothing but going to them, they treat us like subhumans. Take a look around you, what you see is just illusions. Everything goes in circles, but there's no revolutions. They create the problems, then they offer the solutions. We're nothing but going to them, they treat us like subhumans.
What you see is just illusions. What you see is just illusions. What you see is just illusions. What you see is just illusions.
ODB TV Truth Division, the one and only. They hate the fact that I'm nosy, but I say fuck it, blow me. I'm a researcher, a real truth seeker. This is my classroom, fool, I'm a school teacher. Prepare to be blown away, everything you know gets thrown away. Take your mind to a whole nother level, put the pedal to the metal with no delay. How much worse must it get before we do something about it? For we are many, they are few, man, we got them surrounded. It's time we think outside the cage where our brains have been placed. The true history of the world has been changed and erased. It's 1984, these things are so Orwellian. Big brother, motherfucker, super totalitarian. Your thoughts being suggested, your speech being suppressed, always being corrected, freedom being oppressed, always under surveillance, in a state of unrest. And if you protest it, they put your ass under arrest. Take a look around you, what you see is just illusions. Everything goes in circles, but there's no revolutions. They create the problems, then they offer the solutions. We're nothing but going to them, they treat us like subhumans.